Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Exceptional Podcast. We have Rory Lemon. First of all, what a cool name. Second of all, absolute boss. They are the creator of Neurocreative, a flow specialist. If you're not sure what that is, don't worry about it. We're going to get into it. An osteopath, and a holistic health coach. They have experience helping neurodivergent individuals help turn procrastination, hypersensitivity, and self-doubt into creative strengths. To be honest with you, I think most of us could do with that. They started their journey in their early 30s, discovering they were dyslexic, also overcame psychosis without medication, which, let me tell you, is no small feat. They developed a holistic approach, integrating movement coaching and creative productivity. So, very much a kind of new age approach, moving beyond the traditional Western medical way of doing things. They are very passionate about transforming neurodivergence into creative success. The role of movement and the nervous system plays a pivotal role in their productivity mantra. And they also help individuals overcome creative blocks and sustain focus. So essentially, a guardian angel for neurodivergence. Hi, Rory. Great to have you.
Thanks, Nat. That was lovely to hear.
I'd love it if you could introduce yourself in your own words, and maybe we can start off with a bit of your own backstory.
Without going off on the tangent here, what I love to help people with is either what they're dealing with in the moment currently, and that can be social anxiety, rejection sensitivities, all the kind of stuff that valid. And it's remembering that the centerpiece here is mental fitness for me that really helped, and also heart-centered leadership, which is about knowing how to lead ourselves, not stand on a stage unless you want to do that and you haven't been doing that. But that sense of how we lead ourselves, how we react and respond to our environment is what neurodivergents typically really have struggled with in the past, and bringing that all together as a piece to get back into flow. So flow, just, you don't have to be creative as in, I want to be a grand artist, but it can be a state of when we're in flow, we don't know that the time and space is there because we are comfortable, we're clear-headed, and we're just focused on what we like to do or want to do. And that's possible for anyone, not just lucky few here and there, or the ones that seem like they've had luck. There's ways to work on these things and build these mental muscles, work on them as fitness tools in mind and body, and bringing that together as a holistic approach to work with our neurodiversity and to create what we want going forwards, and our productivity, to have the work environments and the relationships and the health that we deserve and want and can work on once we've cleared all the swearing too much, all the BS out, what's not necessary to focus on, because that's what our minds will do. Our minds will go, what's wrong? And here's why it's wrong. Or don't know why it's wrong, but it feels wrong. And actually it's not necessarily it's wrong. It's a negative feeling, but it's actually a signal that can actually show us what to do next. And so that's reestablishing what's coming up for us with our minds, bodies, emotions, and having a clear picture of where we want to go is the coaching angle on it all. And so, neurodiversity and creative flow and productivity is all what it's a new field as well, right? So it's very difficult to say what works individually and what works commonly. We hear about what works commonly through people all the time talking about, hey, just do this productivity tool, or just do this breathwork practice, or just do this thing. I'm fanatical about all this stuff. So I've gone round everything what's commonly known, typically and holistically, divergently, and gone around it, self-tested it. So I know it from my own personality strengths, what I can work from. And that's what I'm not going to pretend that I can do all these things for everyone, but it's working with what I know does work. And that's where it comes back to focusing on what works and then building upon it. And essentially we can use our creativity to actually be creative and do creative projects for us, for ourselves, or as a business. It's actually possible, and it doesn't have to be a struggle. We get the solitary time, and we also get the collaboration time. And some people struggle with either one of those. That's where I think we could get into, is like this whole idea of introvertedness and solitary is not interlinked directly, and extroverted and collaborative is not necessarily fixed as well. So yeah, we need a balance of both to have an idea, work on it, and have it spread with collaboration as well.
Now, I definitely will be getting into the more holistic approach and some of your strategies, but I would love it if we could go a little bit more into your own personal story, because I think people always connect with people. If you could give us like a quick summary, which I know is not easy, of how you got to where you got to right now.
Most of I've talked to with people, the more I realize about ADHD and where I resonate with both of those, or that type of diagnosis that's just coming out as a sense of autism and ADHD, even though I don't have qualifications in either. I like to call them qualifications because they are a step towards understanding, and they are in self-education in a lot of ways. I first qualified in dyslexia at 33, like you shared before. That was a revelation whilst I was studying the neuroscience of what's typical brain function, as well as what was going on for me. So I got to see both sides at the same time while studying it. Before that, it explained a lot about why I had all these ideas, downloading, intuitive. I was very intuitive. The way I can describe it is people typically can see things in pictures, which is where we all come from as children, and it differentiates into more sensory feelings, like how I operate with feelings rather than visuals. I'm more feeler than visual. And then there's logic and words, and actually seeing the words and being hyperlexic potentially around that sense of hearing things in words or processing language as a way to communicate ideas. So there's visual, sensing, and linguistic as an overall thing. And I was sensory. So I got into music and played guitar from the age of 16 through to 24 because it was regulating my nervous system. I didn't know I was doing it for that reason at the time. I just loved it, and it just was drawn to it, and I could just do it over and over and over and over and over and over and over again every single day. But it wasn't necessarily growing me in terms of sharing my ideas or understanding stuff. So that's where I was frustrated, and that's where I didn't believe I knew how to communicate. And it really, I was done a lot of research in my past, coming back to that school grade results was the thing that I thought I was in control of by deciding who I was. I thought I'm more of an artist, less of a communicator, not very pushy business person. And I've got a money story that says that it's evil to have too much, not evil, but it's to have too much money is unfair. And the society and institutions don't understand intelligence because it's all graded in this certain way and gets people to compare each other and judge stuff at school. That's where I had a resentment around all of that. And I was carrying that, thinking, being righteous about it in my own head. But then also that righteousness in my own head bled into being so frustrated and bottled up and unable to explain my emotions that I then went through that mental health crisis.
It's interesting. A few of the points we recently raised in one of our recent webinars on creativity and neurodiversity. And we got as a collective and we were trying to decide, are neurodivergent people inherently creative? Is the creativity a response to the adversary of day-to-day life? And ultimately, we came to a somewhat conclusion that creativity is just an alternative form of communication. And it sounds like that has very much been that for you. But as you said, music, while it has a form of communication, doesn't get you communicating with others. You still have to create some sort of like translator. So I think that's really interesting. I'm going to hit kickstart with our first full question. And I really respect and appreciate your like more holistic approach. But I'll be honest with you, it's not something that I've personally really dived in deep before. So there's a lot of like new terms that I'm not familiar with, and I'm pretty certain that maybe quite a few of our listeners and watchers aren't familiar with. So with that, I want to know, what does neurocreative even mean? And how might it reshape people's current understanding of neurodivergence?
Yeah.
I did
Firstly,
say easy questions.
I'd like to say that any idea we have has come from a realization of stuff that's been known from before. So nothing really is ever an idea.
Modernism. Everything that has been created is just joining things together. Don't worry, I'm not going to quote you for like completely creating it, but I would say maybe popularizing.
Okay, yeah, that's a good one. That's a good term. But yeah, so the idea of neurocreative for me is the sense of what we focus on, the blood flow goes to that area of the brain, then a belief and a habit system starts to have if it's repeated. So whatever we repeat, whatever we learn, experience and believe is true and then repeat over and over again will become more stronger bonds in the brain. So it's the idea of neuroplasticity. In this time, neuroplasticity is the idea that not just it can build and grow and become stronger. If I go, the sky is blue and it's always blue, and every single time I look at the sky, I can see some blue and I just believe it's blue. But yeah, obviously there's different shades, different colors throughout the day as well. Focus on something else. But if I'm fixated on sky is blue all the time, that becomes a bond that's stronger and stronger. It's difficult to let go of that as such, but that's the point being, is that whatever we start to focus on or change a perception is where we can then create something, a new habit or a new focus, and start to let go of bonds. And another way of describing it in physical terms is if I pick up a weight and I'm lifting a weight here and there in this particular way, the particular muscles I'm using will get stronger and stronger. And I won't necessarily, if I'm doing that every single day, I won't necessarily be able to do other types of movements as well. I'll start forgetting them and they'll become weaker again. That sense of neurocreativity is mental belief systems and habits, but also it ties in with what's happening in the body as well. So bioplasticity is another newer term around this. But it's literally like whatever I do with my body is going to get stronger at, and whatever I don't do is going to get weaker at. And the same for what we think and feel.
Is it the same as a growth mindset, or are they do they differ at all?
That's a good question. A growth mindset. I love the growth mindset because it is about remembering to check in and stay focused on what you do want to grow. And it's not just about what is happening, but also the growth mindset is also about remembering not to get caught up in the negative bias of things, because that's what the brain will do. It's there to go, okay, yeah, it's going to point out what's wrong in order to make sure I don't danger myself. So if we didn't have that at all, we could damage ourselves by not having danger points and alert systems coming up for the negative. But staying there isn't useful. So growth mindset is to go, what do I do with this information and where do I want to go with it? And how can I stay open to new experiences and opportunities? And that's where the neurocreativity can come in. Understanding neurocreativity is the sort of this bit of the science, but also the philosophy and the principles of growth mindset.
I see a bit of an offshoot. So if you have a growth mindset, then you can have neurocreativity.
Yeah, almost the other way around. Or the other way around.
You then growth mindset.
Yeah, if you understand about neurocreativity, that what you do focus on will grow, and what you want to choose what you want to focus on, then the growth mindset will help to get there.
Got you. Okay, now that's really interesting. And I think to bring this alive even further, I'm going to essentially put it back to yourself personally. And I'd love to know how you've used this, either growth mindset or your neurocreativity, to turn conventional procrastination and hypersensitivity, which of course is really common in neurodivergent individuals, make this creative fuel.
Thank you for sharing and asking that. It's really powerful to get asked this because it's exciting. How have I turned procrastination's hypersensitivity into creative fuel? Yes. So firstly, procrastination, what is it? It's realizing you're doing something automatically that you don't want to be doing instead of something you do want to be doing. It's only in that realization that it becomes procrastination, because procrastination in itself It could be that you crave rest, so you go and do something. You might actually be hypersensitive and need to rest your mind or your body or do something different to take yourself away from that hypersensitive moment. So in that sense, procrastination is a choice and an attitude once you realize it. Otherwise, it could also be proactive. It could be proactive rest that's deliberate. But if we realize that taking some active recovery, 5 minutes to just decompress, calm down, relax, is part of getting more stuff done for creative fuel, then it's deliberate and it's not procrastination anymore. It's only our attitude to what it is. So I just like to remind people and that's what the coaching element is about, is to go, what is really important? What's actually really important? Because there's always going to be challenges to get there because we're not there. So it's always like, what can be improved upon or worked on, and what can be learned in the process? Come back to growth mindset, what's learned, how can we learn to get there? The real challenge is the hypersensitivity, not the procrastination, because the hypersensitivity is the emotions that cloud us in the moment that will cause us to automatically procrastinate or do something pleasure seek or just stress out and stay stressed.
Is it like, obviously, procrastination, as you said, is a choice, and you can turn it into a proactive thing, such as resting isn't procrastinating because it recharges you, whereas hypersensitivity is not so much a choice. It's more of a biological thing. So they're actually quite different.
Yes. Yeah. So the hypersensitivity, the way I understand it, coming from very sensitive emotionally and not knowing how to put it into words when a thought or a feeling comes up and it's suddenly a wash of feeling, the ways I've come to turn that into creative fuel is through a process, what I call the 4R technique that I've developed myself, but it's come from various other places, mental fitness trainings and understandings, but it's very simple 4Rs to remember it: recognize, refresh, rehearse, and result. And so if we don't recognize that we're being hypersensitive and that's overtaking, that will take us into an action, whatever action we respond to with our sensitivities. So will automatically lead us to the same result. So what we want to do is recognize, refresh, rehearse new results, or the same if it's actually appropriate, if it's necessary. But what's that result that we want to stick to? We can't just jump to there. There's a little process to go through, and to actually, here's an example. Social anxiety is something that I struggle with because I wanted to talk, but I didn't know how to. So I'd turn up at places, being an extrovert trapped in an introvert way of being or personality. So ambiverted is what I found out about as well. To be ambiverted is to crave time with people, but also need time alone as well, and an equal amount of both. It can be extended periods of one, but then it has to be an extended period of another. So to come back to hypersensitivity, how I've turned it to creative fuel is a process of remembering and starting from the end goal in mind and getting back to my vision of what I want in my life and why it's important and what purpose that has and how it will actually help others. It comes in from, what am I allowing into my life? What am I consuming? This is a source of happiness. My little source of happiness is a triangle. What's coming in? What am I doing with it? And what am I putting out into the world? If I've got an equal amount of consumption of good quality relationships or information, or I'm studying something that I enjoy doing, what do I do with it? And actually self-practice, mindfulness, meditation. Maybe that's difficult for some people, but there's always ways to modify that doing for the self to make sure that there's active recovery, like we just talked about. And what we put out into the world, how do we share that knowledge or that insight, is inspirational. And inspirational is bigger than the self. It helps everyone move forwards. And this is why we have these conversations, is to create inspiration for others and to help others. These conversations, right, in some ways. So to come back to turning it to creative fuel, if you would like to pick a card.
Stop. Yeah, that one will do. Oh, trust.
So trust is that there's a number of my highest values that I've written down. This is one of my highest values that I put together. And so We can suddenly have a great conversation about trust if we wanted to, for instance. But the idea being that it's written in red as well. So it's to create trust in the moment. And so whatever meaning or perspective, it just throws a higher level value and a perspective that changes perspective in that moment, which can take us away from being hypersensitive and remind me of who or what I really love about being alive and human and moving through things. So when I'm reminded of my highest values, I can't be reminded of the anxiety or the danger or whatever else is going on. So
Yeah.
it's not just a distraction tool to calm down, but also as a focus tool to move forwards.
I wonder if you, because again, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm hearing a lot of similarities between CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. Is it more like tangible?
Good question. I studied an overview of it while studying osteopathy. And yeah, I guess there's always going to be similarities with these things. And that is something that, yeah, it would make sense. I haven't studied CBT.
The basic idea is that it's about understanding your emotions and your feelings. So, for instance, if you are struggling with pain, rather than ignoring it, you embrace it and be like, okay, I understand how I'm feeling. Now, the reason I bring it up is that a lot of neurodivergent people struggle with CBT, and it's because of hypersensitivity. So, if you're already really sensitive, you don't want to be thinking anymore about how sensitive you are. And it's that people are always asking me for alternative approaches. So listening to what you're saying, I'm like, it's definitely not the exact same thing. So maybe it might be more appropriate for people who are hypersensitive.
Yes. It certainly revolutionized my way of picking something. If I'm anxious in the moment, I can do it for myself. It's also a tool that I then, if I do want to go out and I'm meeting people and I'm automatically, their sensitivities come on about the fear of being judged or whatever it is for either talking or not talking or whatever it is that can come up. And that's what I used to struggle with a lot, is to remember that I can stay silent and no one will care. And so that's my tool, is to go, okay, start from baseline, see who I resonate with and see who wants to have a higher level conversation straight away, because I'm not about small talk or anything like that. It doesn't process for me in that same way. And that's what I often get a lot of autistics will also struggle with, is either deep level conversation, but no small talk. Yeah, at the same time. So that's where I also resonate with that a lot. So it just gives me an opportunity to calm myself in the moment, either with people or not, and also start conversations that I want to have with
I
us.
see that being really useful because you mentioned, do you say omnivert? Is that when you're a little bit of both?
Ambivert, yeah.
Ambivert. I personally resonate with that myself. I need like 50-50. And it's, as someone with autism, it's interesting because I love having deep chats. I hate small talk, but I need something to initiate the deep talk, because you just go right into it a bit much. So I think having your kind of like cards is a really great way to break the ice. And I think talking about these strategies, which sounds like you've got a good amount of them, brings me nicely on to your book. And it is Correction. Brilliant. That's a lot easier for me. Collections. And I would like to know, what is one mindset shift in your book that you think has been quite transformative? And also, can you just tell us a little bit about the book as well?
Yeah, sure. I was always fascinated with words. I started to call myself prolexic, because it's not about whether I can process quickly or not in the moment. I love communication and language. I had all the hypersensitivity and rejection sensitivity around not being able to come up with it quickly in conversation, unless it was a one-to-one where we're calling and responding and listening to each other and then stopping and waiting for someone to finish and then continuing. And that's conscious communication, which I really advocate for those that are hypersensitive, because they get to express if they want to, as much as they want to, until they stop, and then they don't have to. But coming back to the idea of the book, was that I would write down, I didn't really see myself as a poet, as a writer as such. for so long that I just used to throw down my ideas, but I'd just write notes and notes of new names that would come up, like flourishment, for instance. And there's one at the back here called achievement cheer.
Nice. I like it. Very Shakespearean, like amalgamating words.
Achievement cheer, which is the sense to go and make something happen.
I like that.
So that's the kind of thing that you can say sense is what goes on in my brain a lot of the time with words, and how it just will automatically mash things in and play around with stuff. So I would constantly write stuff down. That book is a collection of writings all the way from 2007, my first ever poem that I put together, through to 2021. And so I've got a lot more going on since I've started writing more. But the whole point of the book is, from a dyslexic and ADHD point of view, it's not a lot of words. The whole point is it's pictures and colors and textures for more creative types, or more people that not necessarily consider themselves creative, but respond in other ways than just text and black and white text. So this didn't get me tired when I was writing it and doing it as much as I've written a chapter in a book recently, which is much more basic left to right text. And so that was a lot more challenging for me over the last few weeks. Whereas that was like, oh, this is how I get to put together the book, put it all together and just rearrange it and play around with it and be myself, and to show that it's something that can be just extracted upon in the moment. It doesn't have left to, it's literally, oh, what's here? And pick one. And then there's double pages that have similar themes on the symbols to know that it's a double pager. There's nice photos that I've taken that have got different textures and colors. One quote here that started off a lot to do with it was the work-life balance. Everyone's heard about this work-life balance before, but the work-life balance without using holistic health hygiene, and that's my term for looking after yourself in a lifestyle choices kind of way, moving, eating, breathing, sleeping, thinking, feeling, expressing, connecting, all those kind of patterns, how we relate to the world or do stuff with our bodies and minds. That's holistic health hygiene. So without that holistic health hygiene as the balance point of the seesaw of the work-life balance, is just a plank. So the point being is that without work on one side and life on the other, whatever that means, without some kind of balance point to actually seesaw around and teeter and go, oh, I'm moving towards this, or I'm moving towards that, or I'm organizing my time here, without health being the pivotal point, our health and our inner resources to manage a healthy workplace and a healthy life is health. So for me, it becomes just a plank. And obviously the word plank can, as a reference point, can mean useless or on its own. But yeah, what you do with the plank is most important.
I like that. It's very much, your book sounds like apology poetry, like a nice kind of like blend of the two. And interesting, a lot of my favorite artists were also dyslexic and also very accomplished poets in their own right. One that comes to mind is John Lennon, which a lot of people wouldn't realize he did poetry, but he published, I think, 1 or 2 books, and the way he wrote and came up with words, his dyslexia, I would say, is a huge part of that creative process. And likewise, he was inspired by C.S. Lewis, who did Alice in Wonderland and other kind of books, which are also very poetic in how they connect and join together. So really fascinating approach. Let's keep this party going. So how do you balance structured productivity and creative spontaneity? So it's similar to what we said before, but it's saying, I want to be productive, but I also don't want to sacrifice my creative side. How do you get that kind of seesaw balance?
I love it. I love that question. And it comes back to a concept. And I have like analogies and concepts for most things that are easy and bite-sizable for those that struggle with a lot of words. Again, so I call it fluid planning. And it's the difference between again, if we think of things from a mental fitness point of view, it's only our perception of what is bad or good is happening that will have us have a response to that. What our belief of that is going on. And so, yes, there's what seems like a lot of immoral things going on in the world. However, if we don't look after how we react to that's important. And so to come back to what challenges us and what is comfortable, either one of those can be overdoing, overloading. Too much challenge will overload us, either physically or mentally. Too much comfort will underload us mentally or physically, and again, what we shrink, neurocreativity was, we shrink away from what we don't focus on. So I'm talking about challenge and comfort because that is affected by chaos and order. And so life, spontaneity, chaos comes along. It's in the wind. You can see it in the trees. There's order to how the trees grow, and yet they move and adapt in the wind to the changes that are happening. And so that idea of structure and spontaneity is a balance. And how do I balance it? First of all, it's nice how it led on from that finding balance with the seesaw, but noticing that it's not about trying to stay still. Otherwise, what's the point? What would be the point in staying completely still in life? Because we will lose the sense of pleasure or a sense of what we want to grow with. So it's not about trying really hard to find a balance. It's about playing with it. So coming back to fluid planning is that there's always going to be things in the day, and that's what ADHD, the positive side of ADHD characteristics is that we can deal with things in the moment and we don't necessarily track or plan things. Then the autistic side of things with the sort of more farmer mentality is, have you heard about these mentalities where ADHD is potentially hunter-gatherer genetics? ADHD potentially more a hunter-gatherer style mentality, genetics, being in the moment, constantly on alert to make sure there's nothing dangerous going on, very good in high stressful environments, dealing with people, looking for what's important, shiny objects, interesting. Everything has to be interesting, on alert. So you put someone that gets to be outdoors doing some kind of activity like that, do they have a problem anymore? If they're happy and in their environment, do they have ADHD anymore in that moment? And so the idea about the farmer mentality, the opposite side of that mentality, is again personality traits. You can have both. That's why ADHD can be so confusing, is to go from one to the other. But the one element of autism is the liking the structure and the order of things, and to build and grow on to track stuff and focus on it and watch it grow and build upon ideas and build trust in the details. And that's the polar opposite in terms of a conceptual to being in the moment and not focusing on remembering anything as such. Coming back to how do I balance it? It's a case of my diary. I would not write things down for years, and I was really struggling with that. So I started writing stuff down. So as soon as I started writing stuff down, I was able to create cool things, or at least express myself in a way in which I could. And beyond the writing things down, there's also the diary management of time management, is energy management as well. So it's not just necessarily here I want to be doing this at this time. I also want to make sure I adapt to make sure that I'm doing some rest time in my day to decompress. So active recovery, specific goal leveraged actions, or quality actions that aren't directly related to the goal but still useful, or general tasks, or as I start to say this, it's probably like people that go, I can't stand any of that routine, organizing the routine in that way. But the point being is that the gaps and the spaces for these things can be exactly individualized and playful. So if we can get to be playful with our organization and our routine, then we have space between for the chaos to come in and change, and we can just go, okay, I didn't do that bit, I can just do it over here. If I get 3 things done today, what would they be? That kind of.
From what I got from what you were saying is you don't, and that's actually okay. But I was getting this image in my head of a seesaw. So seesaws, if they flat, they suck. No one's having fun on a seesaw. That doesn't do anything. If, however, you just stay on one side, which you do when you play on your own, they also suck. But you want a little bit, you want movement, which is playful. It's not completely over one or over the other. It's that nice, when we say balance, we don't mean flat. We mean a bit of wiggle. And I think That's perfect creativity.
Yeah, what I love about what you brought back to that, and the idea that the creative spontaneity can be organizing your structured productivity, and
Mm.
your structured productivity can also organize your spontaneity. So that's what I like about both of those, is that they can interweave quite naturally, just like, again, coming back to that idea of the tree blowing in
Yeah.
the wind.
It's, I guess, planned chaos. Like, for instance, the tree plans for that to happen. And without the structured base, it wouldn't be able to do that. And without that, it wouldn't be able to spread its seeds. So essentially, chaos is needed. And I think society often labels creative chaos as something to be avoided. Maybe that's something that we need to readjust. Now,
Yeah.
into our conversation, we're moving more into the kind of more tangible strategies that could help people. And I know you spoke about breath work and lymphatic or whatever health. And I'm curious about how breath work, how does it connect with creativity,
Oh, wow. Okay.
if it does at all? But I think
Yeah.
that there's some connection.
Yes. The center point is energy management, energy regulation. Because then if we've got the energy, we can organize everything else around it, or do things that we want. So that I've tried to keep it as simple as possible here, because health can go down such lots of different routes. But you're talking about creative performance. And I like to remind people again, because it's come up a couple of times, that creativity this is the output of my creativity. So I like to come back to the idea of it's an energy, it's a source, it's a power that we have as humans to have free choice to go, what do I like about this? Okay, I like these three ones. I'll put them together and write a story about these three elements. So creativity is a natural process that we're doing with our day. If you're more and like to organize things, but don't see yourself as an artist, you're we're an artist of our lives. We're the artist of our day. We're the artist of our choices and what we plan and do. So if you love organizing things, putting things into place and setting things into alphabetical order, that's a creative process, even if it's very structured. And some people, I would look in on awe at some people that could manage their day before, or talk spontaneous. I planned and repeated everything that I've said so many times now that it just comes out naturally. Whereas I can't do that with a new piece of information. The dyslexia is like a turtle with the information coming in, new information. So yeah, my self-expression is so important for me to feel like I'm expressing myself. Whether or not it's validated from other people or not is another thing, but I will go online and do lives and just talk, because that's what I wanted to do, is practice that. But yeah, so that idea of creativity is coming back to creative performance, it's what you want to create in your life. Even if it's a nice, loving relationship, that's an art. So as a skill to learn, and it can be focused on no matter what the challenges that come up. So it's coming back to, what do you want? Creative performance is getting back to, what do you really want in life that you don't have now that you'd like, that would make an improvement or make things less in the challenge area or less in the comfort zone area. So coming back to movement and breath work, you specifically said breath work about creative processes. So that comes back to energy.
Yeah.
And I would just say,
from that, it seems to fit quite nicely into what we previously discussed about essentially order and chaos, where art is quite a chaotic form, but unless it has some order, it's not portrayed. So maybe that for people who are quite frantic and chaotic, I'm guessing that kind of breathing work and movement, maybe meditation, any form of kind of relaxation, can help stop the wobble being so dramatic and level it out a little bit. Because like, you don't want someone who is so creative that you're not able to bottle it up into give it to the world in some form. Then it's only beneficial to yourself and maybe not to others. And I think most art is created for the benefit of the many.
yeah, love it. Reminds me of, as well, coming back to a sense of trying to keep it simple here right now for movement, breath work, and lymphatic health. All this health work, lymphatics is basically in between the movement and our metabolism and the way in which we have our immune system optimized so that it can get the bacteria and the viruses out, or remove the waste products and get the stuff we don't want out of our system, keep the pipes clean, as it were. So that's what lymphatics is all about. Movement and breathing helps us to keep metabolism. It all comes back down metabolism, but not from a space of the output of metabolism is whether we put on weight or lose weight. Like creativity being the artwork, being the output of creativity. The weight loss or gain is the output of whether the metabolism is what it's is depending on what state the metabolism's in. So moving and breathing helps with our metabolism and our nervous system regulation and our immune system as a result of that. So that's where I would say it's about, if it's someone's one last piece on that is remembering, and I love the analogy of the mind is like the email service. It's going fast, it's instant. So if I want to move my toe, I want to move my toe, I move my toe, boom, just like that. But the hormone system to create digestive juices to digest our food on response to eating, that's a bit slower. And there's even slower hormone systems that, like the monthly cycle for women is very clockwork, but it's also on its own rhythmic rate as such. And so that's that snail mail packages going through the system on the blood. So the reason why I'm saying that is that our minds will want to just do something really fast and quick, but our bodies go much slower. So in itself, if someone can't sit and meditate for any particular amount of time, there will be a moment that can be maximized on. So even if seconds, relaxation and mindfulness, that's important to do to slow down the mind and to separate our mind. And so anything that can be done and challenged and grown and just made a little bit stretched out a little bit. That's all I've done with my mental fitness training is I did it fanatically for a year and a half nonstop until I was able to stretch. And even then, we don't stop the thoughts. It's not to stop the thoughts, let them come in and out. So that mindfulness, that movement and that lymphatics and the breath work is really important for whether we have more chronic health stuff.
Thank you. And all of these ideas are really fantastic, and I think would definitely help people who have maybe tried more conventional approaches and it has not worked. Like most things in life, it is a balance about trying things from different areas and seeing what works for you. Now, you've got lots of ideas and maybe less conventional methods of supporting people. Realistically, they're just not embedded in day-to-day society. So my final question to you, and this is looking out into the future, if you could redesign educational workplaces to be fully neuro-inclusive, how might you do that? And would you incorporate any of these methods that you've talked about today?
Yeah, it comes back to neurocreative leadership, which is not just the neurocreativity and understanding that's happening non-stop. And our imagination fuels the neurocreativity and whether what we focus on grows. But the leadership part is not about being the head of the team. It's about recognizing that we all have contribution and voice within a sense of how to apply what we get from ideas. And so if we're talking about education and workplace, we're talking about exploring everyone's it comes back to personality and what we acquire and what we feel like we have an intrinsic personality that reacts and responds to preferences, but also what we acquire from our life experiences, that maybe how we're brought up as with parents and all that kind of stuff can add on more layers to our personality that maybe feel like they conflict or not conflict. But whatever we've learned to react to, if we can remember to learn to respond in a certain way, in a particular way that helps rather than hinders or causes more stress for ourselves, it's either to self-express or it's to contribute. If there's one thing that I would change, it's allowing someone to have the space in the education systems and the workplaces to self-express no matter what. And that doesn't have to be words. It can be to get up and move and dance and if someone without distracting anyone else, if someone's at the back and needs to move whilst they're listening to a lecture, that's okay. Or just adapting everyone's requirements, but also not just assuming things are fixed a particular way. So that's my real key take home thing, is that not to assume things are fixed, because I've gone through my things mentally. I've gone through RSIs physically through doing massage and osteo, and rested and repaired and had treatment, and it's calmed down, and I don't have that anymore. It's whatever I'm overdoing, which will have signals coming up for. Not assuming things are fixed is the holistic approach to going, okay, look at what works, look what doesn't work, look at it all, look at what commonly works, look what it needs to be applied individually, and see what's possible to change as well. So see what's possible to change through feedback, communication, and allowing self-expression and collaboration where necessary as well. So that, as much as I can say it in that way,
it's a big question, honestly. I think what you said does make a lot of sense, and it's a lot of people's answers to this question is, oh, we need to study more of this, less of that. But I think you've come at from a different approach, more of a mindset or guidelines to how to be more creative and agile. So for instance, if you have someone in the workplace who is autistic, rather than having a concrete set of this is what you do, it's more of a guidebook on how to be more adaptable and to allow people to find their own paths and to find it collectively. Because it's easy to say, all right, what's worked for you in the past? Not so easy for the person to answer. Anyway, that's what I took from it. We've reached the end now, Rory. No more grilling, I promise. I can relax, but thank you so much for today. I found it really interesting and a very unique perspective. So really appreciate you joining us.
Yeah, it's really honored to be here. And yeah, it is that thing of health is a big thing, but I think that's the thing. If we work on that first, then and see what's possible to change with that, is that's my mantra. That's what's possible to change, because that's what I was going on without any words from that whole time I recovered, going through the last 25 years. It's curiosity. So if we use curiosity, creativity, we can navigate a better world. So thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks. Rory Lemonade.